Welcome to A Drop of Silence, the groundbreaking podcast series that dives deep into the realms of controversy. Join us as we bring special guests who share their extraordinary experiences and offer unparalleled insight into history, today's news headlines, and the future. Get ready to embark on a thought-provoking journey where silence speaks volumes and the truth lies somewhere beneath the surface.
What time will it be when war is no more? When bullets are melted and the warships moor.
Shalom. My guest this week is Dr. Alexander Cintron, and I have known Alex for several years now. And we've become very dear friends. But one of the things he and I are most vigilant about is educating students on how the world has come to be, i.e. history, looking at civics and civic rights, and getting them to read different perspectives. Considering how many books have been banned, and some of my all-time favorite books that have been banned now, The Great Gatsby, and there's so many by J.D. Salinger. They hate J.D. Salinger. They hate Hunter Thompson. They hate all of these people. They hate The Color Purple. Who can hate The Color Purple? It's a magnificent book. They hated Maya Angelou. All of these people who are banning books. And I thought, no, we've got to really explore this. And why are people being so darn stupid when it comes to looking at other people's points of view? Are they that terrified, or are they not educated? And that's what Alex and I explore. I hope you enjoy it.
Joining me on this day is Dr. Alexander Cintron. Dr. Cintron has been in education for the last 20 years. His experiences span across all grade levels, demographics, and both race and social economic status. He has set a track record of being a bridge builder among all people in a mission to transform persistently low-achieving schools into sustainable academic institutions of excellence. And that's when I met him, when he was doing that, and he was amazing. His accomplishments are charted on NBC's Education Nation, which presented both teachers and students from his transforming school, Phoenix Multicultural Academy. He has been featured on Detroit 2020 ABC News, documenting and commenting his daily work as a transformational principal. Currently, he is the Bilingual Director, managing instructional support and service for 7,000 English language learners across 100 schools in the Detroit Public School System District. And you now have a new job, I understand, a new
Correct.
title.
Yes. Weeks ago, I was appointed to be the newcomer director. And that means that I'm now building program within the district to support incoming immigrants that have been here 3 years or less. And that would be right now, we're going to start at the high school, 9 through 12, and build up a newcomer program and look at that as a model to transfer to 99 of the other schools.
Wow. Like, I mean, seriously, you know you're amazing, right?
Well, no, I don't. The problem is I don't. I'm always like, I got to be better because I'm not good enough. I'm not there yet. I don't know.
Oh, jeez. That's amazing. But the reason I asked you on this podcast is because both you and I have serious concerns about what is going on across North America and apparently a lot of other countries, is the banning of great books, and the banning of any books, as far as I'm concerned, I think is an atrocity. Some of the books that are on the latest list are some of my all-time favorite books, like The Great Gatsby, To Kill a Mockingbird, Gone with the Wind, Beloved.
Toni Morrison, Blue Eyes. I was
Yes.
shocked to see that there. Yeah.
I know. So what? First of all, why do you think this happens? Do you like? Is there a trend in this? Like being an instructor of education, do you understand why this is happening?
Well, I think, in my opinion, much of it has to do with fear and the unknown. Because it would be interesting when books are banned. I would love to see how many people have actually read those books from cover to cover. Because what you're finding, there's a lot of conversations about the particular book title or a particular excerpt from the book, but no one's actually read the entire book in context to really understand the meaning behind what is being stated, the experience of what's being stated. And I think that is testament to me that people are very fearful and they don't really have the full knowledge. So those two are very dangerous, as we know through history. Mm-hmm. Fear and the unknown have created atrocities. And as you know, unfortunately, being Jewish, me being a revived Jew, I think that fear of the unknown. And I see it on a daily basis as immigrants are coming into our country wearing a hijab or coming in speaking a different language with different cultures and customs. It brings a lot of fear out in people. And that's when people try to control, and banning books is part of that.
I mean, I immediately think of Fahrenheit 451, but the titles, and then I guess my next question is, can the Board of Education prevent this banning of books? Like, is there, how do these people get this incredible power to ban books and throw them out of libraries, public libraries?
Right. So I think the process, and I don't want to speak for the process, certainly here in the United States, may not transfer to Canada, may not transfer to England, may not transfer to Spain. But here in the United States, the board certainly does wield a lot of power in terms of curriculum, not just ban books, but the actual curriculum that is being touted or looked at for the district. And that does go through the board approval. So if we simply remove banned books from the equation for a second, if we're looking at a curriculum K through 12 that is vetted, there's an RFP process, which is a request for proposals with different organizations like Pearson, Carnegie Learning, Horizon Books, whatever the case may be. All of that's vetted, right? And it's suggested to the Board of Education to make recommendations as to whether to approve or deny it. And it usually involves a lot of community involvement to look at the materials. So depending on what community you're in, there's not one size fits all in what terms of books students are going to be reading and what curriculum is going to be used. So to answer your question, yes, the Board of Education has a lot of authority in terms of what books will be moved forward and what books will be banned. Many of the banned books are based on pressure, right? If the community comes together and goes to board meetings, we had one recently around To Kill a Mockingbird, and the parents wanted that banned because they felt it was the white savior coming into as a lawyer and saving the Black people. And Detroit being a predominantly African American district, they felt that that book should be banned because it wasn't promoting the right message that they feel that their students or their children should be listening to. That's just one example.
Okay, but in To Kill a Mockingbird, he didn't come in and save them. The man was found guilty and committed suicide. How does that? I mean, that to me stresses more that should not be banned. That look at even though people are standing up for other people, it doesn't always work. To me, that was the moral of that story.
Correct. And I agree. And again, it's that unknown, right? And it's also the perspective of To Kill a Mockingbird. That's the wonderful thing about books is Pam Goldstein's going to read To Kill a Mockingbird. Mrs. Smith is going to read it, and Alex Cintron is going to read it. And we're going to walk away with a different perspective on what was actually happening in that book. Who were the main characters? Who was the focus? And in this particular case, the community didn't feel it had a positive focus on African Americans. And the highlight was more on the lawyer who happened to be white, right? So that's the kind of things that we're seeing where people are reading books or they have an interpretation of a book, and then that is put on a list to be banned based on perspective.
So, I mean, even to ban it from the libraries, though, and like in the schools and everything, I don't understand why the Board of Education cannot stand up to them and say, look, this is your perspective, but this is what this book means to other people. And if children want to read that book, they need to read it. They have every right to read it. You're causing people not to explore further ideas. Can that never be said to these people?
I think there have members that have stood up and said such things. However, the pressure is so great in numbers from the community that many of the board members and or superintendent kowtow to that, and may not stand up for what they feel personally is right, or even professionally in some case, and go with the majority and go with the pressure and ban the book. Because at some point, it's almost easier to finally just take the book off the shelf and out of the classroom rather than deal with the societal pressure of having it in the classroom and or in the library.
Even though they know that is such a wicked road to go down, and it's the start of a horrifying situation, that they still
it is and many districts go to great lengths, and ours included, to vet curriculum. There's weeks, if not months, spent on looking at every single page, analyzing every single word, making sure that it's been vetted appropriately for cultural bias, for sensitivity around LGBTQ issues, around race and religion, around gender, many weeks, and I've been part of this process where the community comes together, a community of teachers, a community of parents, a community of students even come together. They look at the curricular materials, including the novels, and decide whether it's appropriate or not for the classroom. And those aren't necessarily banned books, but it's certainly part of the process that we use when we look at curriculum, and when we look at novels, and when we look at books. And that's the front end. That's the beginning portion of it. Now, when we're looking at books that you had discussed earlier around, like The Great Gatsby, that book has been around, I know, when I was in high school, and I read that in high school, and obviously when you read it in high school. And so there does appear to be more of a trend in not necessarily looking at new curriculum, because most of that's been vetted, but the older curriculum that's been around that was probably customary and aligned during that time. And so in my opinion, it does appear that, material that had been written, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago is, taken out of context here now in 2023, which may have not been appropriately written for today's times. But I know our teachers are very savvy about, taking that context and that material of yesteryears and applying it today and allowing students to have intelligent conversations about that book and really analyzing and dissecting. And I think that's what many people that ban books, a lot of the community members don't understand, is most teachers, including myself, having been a social studies teacher, we look at books and we analyze the book, we dissect the book, and we try to understand. And I'll give you a very prime example, and I know we talked about this, and that was Mein Kampf, which is a horrible book. Now, would I like to personally ban that and professionally? Absolutely. I would. However, in my understanding of people and understanding of history, taking a book like Mein Kampf and getting into the mind of a madman and really analyzing the thinking, analyzing the emotions, analyzing the history of the book, then I think my students really came across with a book that potentially could have been banned and may be on the ban list, I don't know. But they took what was ugly and turned it into something positive, because now they came out ahead understanding this is an ugliness of the past. How do we avoid this? By analyzing the words and the context of a madman. And of course, that madman being Adolf Hitler, which he wrote that book while he was in jail.
Yeah. The other one that really got to me was Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was written in the 1800s. It was the first book ever written about slavery, and it was written by a white woman. Like, all of those things that book stood for. I don't know. I don't understand how the Board of Education can say, oh, we're going to kowtow to that. Like, I'm really having trouble with the Board of Education kowtowing to these people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a struggle, Pam, and I think, I think it, I can't speak for other superintendents, but having been a superintendent at one point in time, you are torn, between your personal feelings, your professional feelings, and then the law, right?
Yeah.
And what the community, would like of you. And many times you have to understand too, the board members are put in place by the community, at least here in the United States. They're put there by a board, by a vote of their peers, right? And that's how they're put into these seats. And so they realize that seat that they happen to be in are the very people that are asking them to ban these books are the very same people that have put them in those seats.
Okay, here's another question, and it's going to be, okay, so what happened to these people to get them to be so stupid? The people that are banning them, like, there is a stupidity there, and you can't say it in any other way. There's a stupidity, there's a bias, there's a hatred, and it comes out in all the books that they're banning. So what happened? Where did society go wrong that we have so many of these idiots walking around making these important decisions?
Right.
Do you have any idea?
No,
I'm putting it hard.
Yeah, that's a big one. No, that's a big one. That, in terms of people's mental health, it does appear that, again, that people are not reading. This is the irony here. I don't think they're reading. They're suggesting books be banned, but have you read the book? One, and really understand it in the context of when it was written. That's key. Right, it wasn't written in 2023, which, yes, would be inappropriate. But was it written in the 1800s by a white woman, as you said earlier? Yeah. And knowing history, and a little bit of tidbit, and this was in my dissertation, I did quite an extensive study on white women, Native American women, and African women, because my dissertation was on immigrant Mexican mothers. So I had to understand women and women's history. And Malala was part of that, conversation being banned. She couldn't read anything, let alone, a banned book, right? But when we look back in history, it's actually really impressive that a white woman wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin because white women were relegated to only reading the Bible, St.
Right.
James Version. They could only read the Bible. So when we look at that and pivot toward history and people understanding history and the history of books and the history of book writing, the history of book burning, the history of authoring, then that really opens people's eyes to say, okay, we're banning books in 2023, but let's look at 1800 when women were very limited on what they can do. So to me, then that begins to shed light very differently on Uncle Tom's Cabin, when you realize, wow, this woman was extremely enlightened to write this book. And so I just, again, I don't know. I wouldn't say people are stupid, but I certainly would say they're uninformed and uneducated on history and what that means when we're talking about banning books, and what you're actually saying is very surface. You know, and I have these cliches, but it's like, don't judge a book by its cover. You know, read the damn thing and really understand the history of the book and why it was written and who it was written by.
So my next question then is about the education system itself. Like, for these people to be so ignorant, is it because we dropped history, teaching history and teaching, like, people don't have to learn about this anymore? Do we go back to the basics and reading, writing, arithmetic, and history so that it doesn't repeat itself, so that Kristallnacht isn't going to happen in another 10 years again? Is it because we dropped all these vital subjects where people learned what happened and what was wrong with society then?
Oh, absolutely. I think we have taken a backseat to really taking a deep dive into history, the history of books. When we look at something as simple as handwriting, that has been dropped from schools. Students no longer write cursive. In fact, if students wanted to read our Constitution of the United States here, they couldn't read it because they don't understand script.
Yeah.
And so we are making a big mistake as educators by dropping a heavy emphasis on the core subject areas. There's not a heavy emphasis on math, social studies, science, and ELA like it should be. We have taken more of a turn on societal concerns, customs, and around what's going on today, but not really reflecting on the growth of the past and really taking a deep dive into our history and really looking at these writings and these autobiographies of, Benjamin Franklin, for example. And what does that mean? Most of our students wouldn't even know, unfortunately, who Ben Franklin is and what he wrote, or the Child's Garden of Verses, by Robert Louis Stevenson. And this kind of information, our students really don't know that. And I think there has been a major drop in history and really taking a deep dive into that. Most of it has become very surface and around the U.S. culture and more on the societal norms, and not necessarily a deep dive into what we used to consider scholarly work in writing.
So the next question is, if the boards of education and people like yourself recognize that these are the problems, is there anything in place to start fixing the problem so we don't have another generation of idiots? Pardon me, but uneducated. I'll say I'll be nice, but
right. No, I think through conversations like this, I think conversations that you and I are having conversations, with teachers, if you're a parent in K through 12, and what that means to you, if your child's wanting to read a book, or if there is a book being banned, I think that is what we do have. I mean, for every person that wants a banned book, there's a person that does not want it banned. And so I think that, everyone's standing up for their rights, whether they want the book banned or not banned. I think it's important for everyone to stand up for what they believe in their community. And that's important. We still have that civil right. I think both sides need to be heard. And then that gives the Board of Education more leverage in terms of, okay, if we have 100 people that want this book banned and we only have 5 that want to keep it, well, then that puts the Board of Education and the superintendent in a very awkward position. But if we have, 50-50 or at least close, 3/4 even, then I think that certainly gives the Board of Education, teachers, and educators a leg to stand on to fight as well, and to give recommendations based on the numbers and community members out there that are advocating.
So then the moral of the story is Martin Luther King was right. You cannot be silent for any of this. If you believe in civil rights and you believe that history and understanding where we came from is important, you have to speak up. You have to be brave and speak up and talk to the Board of Education and your teachers and your principals.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely correct. And it's not easy to do, Pam. And I've been in a situation where I wanted to speak up, not necessarily about banned books, but what does that mean, right? What are the consequences of speaking up? Is that job security? Is that being blackballed? Is that being, ousted for going too much against the grain? So it does come with consequences, and some of those consequences may or may not be worth it. But I do believe we have a strong sense of community. And I think that's extremely important, that no man is an island, and that we recognize that, or no woman's an island, and that we step up for each other and recognize that we're needing to be, in solidarity when it comes to our rights and what we feel is our history and what should be read and what should not be read.
Is there any specific place or any place you can think of where people could write their letters of concern? Who do they address it to?
So in our situation, the superintendent is always, the first, place that you may want to go, and the Board of Education, right? Because they're ultimately the ones that will be making this decision whether to ban a book or not ban a book. But also, I think if you have a collective group of teachers that teach that particular book, I think getting those teachers on board and really understanding how they're teaching the book and what messaging is being made, I think those are really important people that you'd want to contact. And also your school principal. I think contacting your school principal, if it is an issue around LGBTQ or Judaism or anything Semitic around Muslims per se, or gender studies, finding community and nonprofit organizations in your area that could also support you in trying to understand why this book is on the list to be banned or has been banned. I know in our community we have affirmations in Ferndale. We also look at the Southern Poverty Law Center, which does a lot of work around materials such as this, and also the Anti-Defamation League. So there are groups out there that you could write that could further support your mission and your vision in terms of what you feel is best as an individual, but getting other people around you collectively to also write that letter in unison. Power in numbers is still very important. A board is going to listen to a nonprofit of 20, or is going to listen to affirmations or Southern Poverty Law Center versus a singular person. Unfortunately, that shouldn't be the case, but that usually is the case.
Dr. Cintron, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I've learned a lot from you. This is very enlightening, and I hope you'll come on again soon.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. This author, Pamela Goldstein. And I heard that you have a new publishing company. What's the name of that company?
Unbreakable Bindings.
Unbreakable Bindings. I love it. I love it.
Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Ciao. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
What time will it be when war is no more? When bullets are melted and the warships moor.
This podcast is brought to you by Unbreakable Bindings Publishing Company. Executive produced by Lori Baldassi, produced by Ryan Richardson, hosted by Pam Goldstein.